Founders Academy is a 3-part learning journey designed around the real stages of company building. Part 2. Lesson 1. Scaling without breaking. Team, culture, and systems. Learning objectives. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to understand when a startup is actually ready to scale, recognize the difference between growth and scalability, build team, systems, and culture without diluting clarity, apply repeatability as the filter for all scaling decisions, and avoid the most common forms of premature scaling. Introduction. Why scaling is where most startups lose control. Most founders believe scaling begins when the company starts doing more. More revenue, more people, more features, more markets. That belief is understandable, but is also where many startups quietly start to break. I have watched founders raise money, hire quickly, and expand aggressively, only to feel more confused, more stretched, and less connected to the business than before. The problem was not ambition. The problem was that scaling was triggered by activity instead of readiness. Startups do not scale when they raise more money, hire more people, build more features, or expand go-to-market too early. Startups scale when internal clarity and external repeatability meet. This lesson is about identifying that exact point and about building teams, systems, and culture that strengthen the company instead of distorting it. Section 1. From scaling effort to scaling readiness. One of the most common mistakes founders make is scaling effort instead of scaling readiness. The company gets busier, calendars fill up, hiring accelerates, and output appears to increase. Yet decisions slow down, alignment weakens, and momentum feels harder to sustain. I have seen founders mistake spikes for signals, a few big deals, a burst of inbound, a strong quarter driven by personal relationships or extraordinary effort. That kind of growth feels exciting, but it is fragile. Readiness for scale is not about intensity. It is about repeatability. It is about whether the same inputs reliably produce the same outcomes without extraordinary intervention. Until that exists, scaling multiplies noise rather than progress. Section 2. The 3 preconditions for scaling. Before a startup should scale, 3 conditions must exist at the same time. The first is demand repeatability. Customers are coming from the same channels in a predictable way. Not spikes, not lucks, not one-off wins. A simple engine that consistently produces similar results over time. The second is delivery repeatability. The product or service can be delivered consistently and reliably without heroics. If the founder is required to personally intervene for quality to remain high, the system is not ready to scale. The third is internal clarity. The team knows what the company does, who it is for, why customers buy, how customers use the product, and what good retention actually looks like. Without this clarity, scaling only amplifies confusion. If one of these conditions is missing, scaling increases pressure instead of momentum. Section 3. The Repeatability Milestones Framework. A useful way to assess readiness is through repeatability milestones created into a framework. The first milestone is acquisition repeatability. One channel consistently produces leads over at least 6 to 12 weeks. Conversion rates and customer acquisition costs are stable. Growth does not depend on the founder stepping in to close every deal. The second milestone is activation repeatability. Customers reach the moment of value in predictable steps and timeframes. If onboarding relies on explanation, intuition, or magic, the system is not ready. The third milestone is retention repeatability. Users stay, they return. Their behavior signals that the product works. Retention is the truth. Everything else is noise. I have seen founders scale aggressively on acquisition while ignoring retention. The result is more customers, more pressure on teams, unhealthy LTV CAC ratios, lifetime value to customer acquisition cost. This ratio is an indicator of how much revenues you will generate from your average customer compared to how much it costs you to acquire them. It should improve over time. However, if the focus is only on customer acquisition, not retention or growth, It is very difficult for this ratio to improve and the business to grow. Section 4, the operating system for early teams. As teams grow, chaos does not come from lack of effort. It comes from lack of structure. Early stage teams need an operating system that replaces ambiguity with clarity. Not heavy process, but simple, consistent rhythms. The first component is a weekly clarity meeting. 30 minutes, no more than 4 agenda items. What matters this week? What does not change? What changed? What was learned? This keeps attention aligned. The second component is a founder update. A single weekly written memo answering what is true now, what is working, what is not, what comes next. This anchors the team in reality, not in optimism or panic. The third component is 4 to 6 week sprint cycles, short enough to maintain urgency, long enough to reveal trends. Together, these replace chaos with clarity. Section 5, from culture as words to culture as systems. Culture is not posters or slogans. Culture is repeated behavior under pressure. A useful way to think about culture is as a stack. Values define what matters. Behaviors define what those values look like in real life. Systems enforce those behaviors consistently. Without systems, values become decoration. Ownership, for example, only exists if responsibility is clearly assigned, reviewed, and measured. Momentum only exists if progress is visible. Precision only exists if quality is enforced. This makes culture durable as the company grows. It is incredibly important for founders from the very beginning of team formation to be able to share and explain their 5 core values. Those are the ones that define the culture they are building. Some examples could include humility, precision, curiosity, and others include speed. Section 6, hiring your first 10 people. Your first 10 hires define the future of the company far more than your first 100. Early hires should reduce ambiguity, not add complexity. They should learn fast, bring clarity, be resourceful, enjoy building, and own outcomes. Experience here matters less than adaptability. A simple filter often helps me. Would you trust this person with the entire company for 7 days? If the answer is no, they are unlikely to be a strong early hire. Hiring multiplies what exists. If clarity exists, hiring accelerates progress. If confusion exists, hiring accelerates chaos. Remember that as you make your first 10 hires. Section 7, maintaining founder clarity during growth. As teams grow, clarity naturally decays. Founders must actively rebuild it. Weekly, rewrite the 1-sentence description of the company, the one metric that matters most, and the one thing customers love. Monthly, review customer feedback and team friction points. Quarterly, reset goals based on actual behavior, not aspiration, and deliberately kill initiatives that no longer matter. For companies to progress, founders have to subtract the noise. Section 8, what not to scale. Founders break companies by scaling the wrong things too early. Sales before repeatable demand, geography before retention, features before product market fit, managers before individual contributions, strategy before execution. Scaling magnifies whatever exists. If the company is confused, confusion scales. Section 9, framework to assess scaling effectiveness. As companies scale, founders often add more metrics. Dashboards get fuller, reporting becomes heavier, and yet clarity decreases. The goal of metrics during scaling is not visibility, it is truth. There are a few signals only that reliably show whether scaling is healthy. The first is retention. Retention, staying flat or improving, is proof of value. It tells you customers are getting what they came for. If retention is declining, nothing else matters yet. The second is customer acquisition cost stability. CAC does not need to be perfect, but it should be predictable. If acquisition costs become erratic as you scale, it usually means the engine is not as repeatable as it looked. The The third is activation time. As systems improve, customers should reach value faster, not slower. If activation time increases as the company grows, complexity is leaking into the product or the process. The fourth is team velocity. Not more tasks, not more meetings, but more shipped outcomes. When scaling is healthy, output increases without proportional increases in stress. The fifth is culture signal noise. Fewer escalations, less firefighting, clearer ownership. When scaling works, friction decreases, even as complexity increases. These are the 5 signals. Together, they tell you whether the company is becoming stronger or just larger. Section 10, templates and scripts that protect clarity. As companies grow, clarity does not disappear suddenly, it erodes gradually. The role of simple templates is to slow that decay. One of the most effective tools is a weekly clarity memo from the founder. It is not too long. It answers 5 questions. What is true this week? What is working? What is not working? What has changed? What matters next? I have seen founders unlock alignment across growing teams simply by writing this consistently. It anchors reality and reduces speculation. Another essential tool is the scaling decision test. Before any growth decision, ask 3 questions. Is demand repeatable? Is delivery repeatable? Is clarity increasing? If the answer to any of these is no, the decision is not scale, it is discipline. Finally, there is a first 10 hires checklist. Early hires should be smart, resourceful, calm under pressure, clear thinkers, builders, and owners. These are not preferences, they are requirements. Hire these people, remove the opposite early. These scripts are not bureaucracy, they are protection mechanisms. They preserve clarity as the system grows. There is one thing to take away from this lesson. It is this. Scaling is not about doing more. It is about knowing what to repeat, what to reinforce, and what to refuse. When clarity and repeatability exist, scaling strengthens a company. When they do not, scaling exposes every weakness at once. Build systems that replace your heroics. Use metrics that tell the truth. Protect clarity deliberately. In the next lesson, we'll talk about the difficult shift of all, how founders must evolve from building a product to building an organization that can run without them.